Good morning. Welcome. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. Good evening and welcome. So we continue our journey through the development of the understanding of the nature of reality as it is applicable to our endless journey to identify and release ourselves from the suffering that we create by the belief, the mistaken belief in the existence of things. So tonight we look at the master of the middle way, regarded by all traditions as the very first source of the teachings of the middle way, Nagarjuna. And Chris and I thought we might take a quick glance at his life once again. I had circulated a nice legendary account, which is what's common in the Tibetan tradition at this point, because they basically accept what they received from the Indian tradition as a given, and they didn't really fuss about the complexities of time and space and things like that. So it's sort of interesting to see what the Tibetan tradition basically believes that Nagarjuna did and when he lived and so forth. So I'll just share that on the screen. I had circulated earlier, and we'll touch through a few points on it. Chris has put a link. Is that a link to the one I circulated, or?
Yes, yeah, the one you circulated.
Okay, so from Alexander Berzin, wonderful Tibetan, a wonderful person, a wonderful Tibetan scholar, one of the earliest, great websites, Study Buddhism, incredible resource, collection of resources. Nagarjuna and Sangha are the two great pioneers of the Mahayana tradition. So we'll be finishing up with this first part of this three-part course with the sort of successors to Nagarjuna, Bhavaviveka, Buddhapalita, and Chandrakirti, and then we'll be foraging into the tradition of Asanga and his successors in the next part two. And then part three, we see how that part two extends to Shantarakshita, the transmission into Tibet, and then part three takes over in Tibet. So there's the two great pioneers of the Mahayana tradition, born into Brahmin family, mid-first or early second century. He's predicted in various sutras. And, when you look up these predictions, by the way, it's not that clear, these predictions. Some of them are from texts that appeared after the person they're predicting, by the way. So here we have the first wonderful anomaly. Let's see, at birth, a soothsayer predicted he would live only 7 days, but if his parents made offerings to the monks, sounds a little shady, he could live to be 7 years old.
Is that like paying for protection?
That certainly is. Fearing for his life at age 7. So they do the offerings, obviously, and he lives to 7, but then they think he's going to die. His parents sent him to Nalanda Monastic University in North India, where he meets the Buddhist master Sarha. So if you look up Nalanda University, it is said to have operated from somewhere in like the 4th or so century until like maybe the 10th century. So he's sent off to a school that doesn't exist in northern India, which is not unusual. He meets a Buddhist master Sarha, who's said to have lived more like in the 6th, 7th century. And Sarha says, if you do exactly as I say, you can live a long life. And that succeeded. He studies with Ratnamati, jewel intellect, an emanation of Manjushri, and with Sarha. So Ratnamati is this elusive teacher between Sarha and Nagarjuna, and also known by Rahulabhadra. He features in the transmission lineage of a number of things, the Mahamudra transmission lineage, and also I think in the Kagyu lineage tree. He's in there early on.
And he's also said to be the author of that praise we read.
That's right.
The praise to Prajnaparamita.
Yeah. And with Sarha, especially the Guhya Samaja, which appears centuries later. He is famous for gaining the ability to transmute iron into golds, and thereby he's able to feed the monks during a famine. He becomes the abbot due to that wondrous feat. And then when he takes over, he gets rid of 8,000 monks who are not keeping the monastic rules of discipline properly. That's a lot of bad monks. I don't, how many monks were there, but 8,000 of them were not properly keeping the vows. Wow. Then he defeats 500 non-Buddhists in debate. So, very apocryphal, legendary story. Two youths come to Nalanda. They smell like sandalwood. They have a new perfume, a new scent that they've found, and they turn out to be Nagas, and they return to the realm and ask their Naga king father, who says if he can help only if Nagarjuna came to the realm under the sea. So that was the test. He had to be able to go under the water, either hold his breath or have some scuba gear, and he succeeds. He knows that they have 100,000 verses of Prajnaparamita. So the Prajnaparamita sutras appear centuries earlier than Nagarjuna, and maybe not all of them. And so he's after the biggest and the best, and he goes there and gets a copy. The Nagas had taken one version of the sutra back to their realm for safekeeping, the gods another, and the Yaksha lords of wealth another. He brings back the 1,000 verse version, although the Nagas kept the last 2 chapters to ensure he would return and teach them. Later he does that and gets the 2 last chapters of he fills them in. He doesn't go back to the last 2 chapters of the 8,000, and that's why the last 2 chapters of these 2 recensions are the same of both sutras. Let's see. He connects with a king who he writes a famous letter to. And so here's his text. We have the 3 different types of texts: the collected works on reasoning, the collected works on praise, and didactic explanations. And the 6 on reasoning start with the root verses, Mula Madhyamaka Karika, and also include the precious garland. And and he apparently writes an auto commentary to the first, which does not exist as far as I know. And then he writes a collection of praises. The three most famous are to the Dharmadhatu and to the ultimate truth, Parama Arta Stava, and to the supermundane Buddha, the transcendent Buddha. And then the didactic explanations are texts on the two bodhicittas, ultimate and relative, bodhicitta vivarana, and anthologies of sutras, Sutra Samuchaya, and he writes a letter to his friend. He also writes some commentaries on the Guhya Samaja, which is the root tantra of the later tantric system, i.e., the non-Nyingma tantric system, and becomes called the Father Tantra system after the father Nagarjuna. He becomes known as the father, and his disciple Aryadeva is the son. So father and son lineage. And most famously, this last text, the 5 stages, Panchakrama, he writes. And that's Aryadeva writes a few famous texts. So that's the backdrop. And let's dive in. We have, for our reading for this class, we have 2 chapters from the Mula Vinyamaka Karika. And the first thing that we gave you is the table of contents of the text, just to see, like, what does he write about? Does he write about the origin of the earth, the world? Does he write about the history of the Dharma? And so you all have this. So he has 27 chapters, and 27 doesn't ring any sacred bells in any other world. But it's sort of like a laundry list of going through Abhidharma topics. Chris, do you want to chime in at this point?
Sure. I just wanted to say one thing first about the miraculous life of Nagarjuna. Um, I think I'll just speak for myself. My initial reading is to kind of roll my eyes and be like, yeah, right. This is some hagiography and I don't know, not really relevant to serious, meditators such as ourselves. But I think that misses out on so much. Um, I circulated a portion of an essay by Jan Westerhoff about that kind of interpretation and how limiting it can be, and how we shouldn't be so quick to dismiss the Buddhist tradition's own sort of sense of history making, um, and an understanding that they look at time in a very different way than we Westerners do. We've seen versions of what that sense of time looks like in the Abhidharma schools, different flavors. Uh, sort of this block time of the Sarvastivada or the presentism um, of the Sautantrikas. But it's I think the best way forward with those sorts of fantastical tales is to suspend our disbelief, and this is the what Jan Westerhoff advocates for, because there's a lot of teachings that are embedded in the mythological accounts, um, and I'll just leave it at that. Um, so
Chris, I'm not seeing, I didn't see this article or essay that you circulated. Did others see this?
it was I sent a few things a number of weeks ago, and it was included in that bundle. I didn't attach it as a PDF because it's in the Golden Age book. It's part of the introduction. I think the section is called "The Game's View of the Game."
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, um, and yeah, he says temporarily bracketing our naturalistic assumptions. So yeah, I don't know if this is an interesting topic for you. That's worth looking at. And I hadn't seen a lot of attention given to serious attention given to how to interpret these miraculous stories. So I thought it was a great read. Um,
Do you want to talk? Do you have like the chapters, the
yeah,
contents?
yeah. Why don't we take a look at the table of contents? I'm gonna pull it up and share my screen. Okay. Um, and I think I've done this before. Okay, here we go. Share. Um, so we have, as is typical, some dedicatory verses at the beginning, and then, yeah, as Derek mentioned, there's just this list that at first glance almost feels kind of random. Condition, motions, senses, aggregates. So these are things that we recognize from Abhidharma, elements, desire and desire is conditioned. But then also some things that are not, obviously related to the Abhidharma lists, such as bondage, combination, errors. Um, and I think what is going on here is that he is starting at the beginning with conditions. This is sort of a tour de force of him just knocking down one thing after another that could be said to possess Swabhava. So what we don't have is a grand theory of Madhyamaka that's being presented, but just anything that could be said to exist. Nagarjuna is taking it apart on its own terms and showing why it is rife with internal contradictions. Um, and that approach is going to be the source of a certain amount of contention among his later commentators. And we'll see one school of thought that says that Madhyamaka needs to be presented on its own terms, needs to make its own arguments, and another that says that that is absolutely the wrong approach. Um, so we begin with the dedicatory verses. I prostrate to the perfect Buddha, the best of teachers, who taught that whatever is dependently arisen is unceasing, unborn, unannihilated, not permanent, not coming, not going, without distinction, without identity, and free from conceptual construction. Did you want to comment on this, Derek? Because I know you were saying how much you liked these verses.
Um, yeah, I've struggled with this always as well as the table of contents in terms of like coming up with some order of these epithets or some sort of system to them. Come up with anything?
I've heard, and I don't know if I completely buy this argument, but I've heard that supposedly it's each chapter is responding to what could be raised as an objection to the chapter preceding it, and so the view is meant to get more and more subtle. But it seems to me that the essence of his argument is really there from the first stanza.
Yeah, and then it seems to repeat over and over again.
Yeah,
I, I,
just with different conditions, so are different things to which it's being applied to.
I was talking about the dedication, any
Oh, sure.
rhyme or reason of that. It also feels like a somewhat random listing of attributes of the transcendent nature, basically. So let's focus in on the first chapter and the first stanza of that chapter as sort of being the essence of everything. As we said in our translation, initially is from Garfield, and I found the Padmakara translation and a couple of others. So maybe we can look through this first chapter in some detail. Neither from itself, nor from another, nor from both, nor without a cause, does anything whatever, anywhere arise. The famous tetralemma, capturing four options or possibilities. That's something, if things really existed, then they would have to have really been produced. And to have really been produced, there's four possible ways that things could possibly be produced from themselves, from another, from both, or without a cause. And Nagarjuna declares that none of those four options is valid. So the four-cornered tetralemma or thesis or proposition is a famous way of capturing all possibilities. And the idea is that in order for us to gain certainty in what's being presented, we need to have confidence that we've covered all possibilities in the four possibilities and that there's no fifth possibility left hanging. So, Morgan, you want to talk about that? You want to talk? You shared a very helpful email earlier. Do you want to
Yeah, sure.
touch on that?
I'll give it a shot. So I sort of was trying to figure this out for myself, as we all try to do, I think. And I broke it down, and I thought of an analogy from a completely conventional perspective. This isn't like, this is what they would call with no analysis. This is not, not meant to be in any way even a gesture toward ultimate meaning, but which is the phrase "laughter is red." And there are at least two claims that makes. One is that laughter has an attribute of color, and laughter has a color. And the second is that attribute has the value of red. And so when you go to negate that, the typical thing would just be to say, well, laughter is not red. And that's just negating the second claim, that laughter has a value of red. It's not negating the saying that laughter has a characteristic or an attribute of color. So it's called an implicative negation. So meaning that it implies that there could be another value for that. Laughter is maybe blue or yellow or green or something like that. So what the tetralemma does is say, no, it can't. There can't be any value for that characteristic because it doesn't have that characteristic. So to apply the tetralemma to laughter is red, you would say laughter is not red. Laughter is not some other color besides red. Laughter is not colorless or transparent or whatever. And laughter is not red and other colors besides red. So there's no, because it's a meaningless characteristic for laughter. So the next sort of step from that is like to say phenomena exist. And the thing that I realize is tricky, that I've struggled with for a long time with this, is existence isn't a characteristic of phenomena or an attribute of phenomena, it's a value. The characteristic or attribute is ontological status. So you're saying, again, two things if you say phenomena exist. One, that they have this attribute called ontological status, and that can have a value of exists, not exists, whatever. And when you do the tetralemma with exists, doesn't exist, Does it not exist? Doesn't both exist and not exist? Does it neither exist nor not exist? You're saying that attribute of ontological status just doesn't apply. It doesn't make any sense here for phenomena. It's not that phenomena don't exist or not exist. They just don't have an attribute or a characteristic that would have that value. And that's and sort of the next step past that, and I guess the last step where Nagarjuna ends up is um, that it would then be easy to sort of do this regress of saying, well, then objects have an ontological status or don't have an ontological status, and there's some higher level meta attribute that has values of ontological status or not having an ontological status. And that's nonsense. And that's where he comes back to emptiness. Objects, phenomena are not empty. They are not non-empty. They are not all that stuff. Emptiness is a value for some characteristic. We don't have a name for it, though. I guess we could make one up. But the point is, emptiness is a conventional way of saying that phenomena don't have any attributes or characteristics, including emptiness. So it's saying it extinguishes all attributes or characteristics of phenomena. And that just leaves you there with, you have phenomena, and and we in our conceptualizing impulse, make up all these concepts like existing or not existing, arising or not arising, ceasing or not ceasing, empty or not empty, exist, and so on and so forth. And what if you read another way to read sort of that table of contents is just, knocking out all of those ways, all of those characteristics or attributes that you might assign to phenomena. So that's how I think about it.
Cool. So before I turn it over to Chris, just briefly, and ask you to go through that, plus ask you to start unpacking the chapter, just to set it up. The second verse, there are four conditions: efficient, percept object, immediate, dominant, just so. There is no fifth condition. So presumably the rest of the chapter is a commentary on this proposition and sort of taking it apart and supporting it. And I'm going to ask Chris to unpack that and see, so is the second verse, which of the four options is the second verse addressing? And does he address the other options or not? This is a setup.
Yeah, no
It's a
kidding.
setup.
I'll note that this was not discussed in our preparatory call. There are four conditions: efficient condition, percept object condition, immediate condition, dominant condition, just so. Efficient number one, percept object number two, immediate condition number three, dominant condition number four. There is no fifth condition.
So why does, he gives this introductory thing where he gives the tetralemma, the four possibilities of production. And then he shifts to the scheme of the four conditions, which is the basic Abhidharma scheme of how things are produced, right?
Yeah, how do those relate to the four Abhidharma modes of production?
Yeah, so the four conditions are how something in Abhidharma arises interdependently. And so in doing that, it seems like he's focusing first on the possibility of something arising from something else. The presumption in the Abhidharma is basically that phenomena arise from these four conditions.
That's right.
That are tentatively or putatively something other than themselves, other than the thing that is being produced. And then I think the remainder of the chapter goes through this scheme. So did you want to add anything to the tetralemma discussion or just go on with verse 3? What's the logic here?
Yeah, I think so. The tetralemma, the idea is that this is really supposed to be an exhaustive account, um, as we've been saying, that there are no other options that aren't covered in the tetralemma. And to Morgan's point, it's really trying to ferret out this non-implicative negation, that it's negating without proposing anything else could take its place. So philosophers call this a category error, and it's not enough to simply say no, laughter isn't red. What is needed is to reject the very premise of the question, what color is laughter? To say you're making a category error that color and laughter does not belong to the category of having a color. And Nagarjuna wants to say that swabhava, anything that has swabhava, anything that could be purported to have swabhava is making a category error. That phenomena as it exists fundamentally cannot possess swabhava.
Okay, so it seems like the next few verses are about the option of things arising from another, in this case, as presented in the Abhidharma scheme of the four conditions. So the efficient condition is often called the causal condition. The percept object condition is often called the object condition, and the immediate is often called the immediately preceding, and the dominant is usually called that. And so the way this scheme works, if we use the scenario of perception, is that let's say we take the favorite object of all Buddhist logicians is what?
A vase?
The color blue.
Oh, blue. Okay.
They were into the blues, the color blue. So the causal condition is light striking something that uh, has the color blue, and that light coming towards us. And the percept object condition is the object that's blue. There's a blue color. And then the immediate condition is that or the immediately preceding condition is there's a consciousness. The moment before this visual consciousness of blue arises, we have, let's say, visual consciousness of the object next to the blue object, or we have, you're thinking about, you look up in the sky and you see the sun, and then you look and you see the sky, which is blue. So there's some consciousness that precedes this as the basis for giving rise to the consciousness of the color blue. And then the dominant condition in this case is the visual sense faculty that resides in the visual sense base, which is called the eyeball. There is no fifth. So the essence of entities is not present in the conditions. So what is he getting at there? Something about like, if those four conditions came together and produced our particular instance or our particular dharma, which in the case that I've given of the color blue is a visual consciousness perceiving blue. The essence of that dharma, that phenomena, consciousness of blue, it's not present in the conditions. It doesn't exist in the object. It doesn't exist in the sense space. It doesn't exist in the light coming off the object. It does not exist in the immediately preceding consciousness of some other object. Right? If it
And
did,
I think when he says essence of entities, he's referring to swabhava.
I would agree with that. So the swabhava of the visual consciousness of blue is now present in those conditions. So somehow it came about, having not existing, suddenly it's existing by virtue of those four conditions coming together. If there is no essence, there can be no otherness essence. What does that mean? Alternate translations are, let's see, when the thing itself has no essence, the other, its conditions, also lack existence.
And I think what he's saying here is that we can't unpack, we can't distinguish causes from effects. There isn't a that both of those are interdependent in such a way and tied up with human cognition that it's impossible to uh, have one without the other.
I, I think like there's a little something, maybe a further nuance in the otherness, but Cynthia.
I just wanted to say, it seems like if the essence or if the essence was in any of the conditions, then wouldn't that mean that it already existed and therefore didn't need to have things coming together to make it exist? The like essentially production from itself kind of viewpoint. So so in one sense, it makes sense that first two lines, it makes sense that, because if that essence already existed, you wouldn't need to make it happen with all these conditions, right?
Right, so that's that's one of the fallacies of production from itself in terms of the four options, right?
Right. And so in this case, though, the fact that they point out that that essence isn't there is like, it seems like it's kind of pointing to that fact, but I guess it's pointing to from, I guess, the Abhidharma point of view, why it takes all these conditions to come together because the thing, doesn't already exist. That's the sort of theory of interdependence, right? Perhaps.
And maybe, sorry,
Please.
and maybe it's something like he's saying, like another version of this stanza, another translation from Padmakar is, the intrinsic being of phenomena lies not in those conditions nor in any others. Um, so he's saying it is produced anew by those four conditions, and it's not produced by itself. He doesn't go into like Cynthia went through, like the reason for that things not being produced by themselves is that they would exist, and there's no logic to that. But he's just saying, okay, it's a given that this swabhava does not exist in those conditions. So, Chris.
Um, that's come and gone.
Yeah, so I went backwards in the stanza, so you were
Yeah.
probably looking at the next two lines. If there is no essence, there can be no otherness essence. Alternate translation, when the thing itself has no existence, so the perception, the visual consciousness of blue, um, the other, its conditions also lack swabhava. If the color blue has no swabhava. The other, its conditions, also lack existence. And so Garfield says if there's no essence, there can be no otherness essence. So if there's no entity of that which is produced, you can't say that anything else is other than that consciousness of blue, because you're comparing it, as Morgan was doing with the color of laughter, you're comparing apples and oranges. It's a non sequitur.
Isn't it, I mean, just really basically that if something doesn't exist, there can't be an other?
There can't be something that's other than that which doesn't exist. Right. It's not this non-existent. You can't say that.
Well, I think that what he's saying is that that if the effect has no essence, then neither can the cause.
And what's the logic for that?
Well, it's not entirely straightforward, is it? Right?
Oh,
Because we could think of all sorts of things of you know, I have children. I'm the father, the cause of the children. If I didn't have children, if my children didn't have an essence, that wouldn't immediately mean that I didn't also have an essence.
right.
If I didn't have, we could say, sure, in a certain sense, I wouldn't be a father, but that doesn't negate the whole, my whole supposed swabhava.
Right. So what is he getting at here? I think it has something to do with the classification of the others as conditions. If they
Right.
don't produce anything, then they're not conditions.
They're not
They're
conditions.
only conditions by virtue of having produced something. And if they don't produce something, then you can't call them conditions. Does that make sense?
And I was going to me, it was, maybe I'm thinking of it differently. You were saying if the result doesn't have an essence, but I was sort of thinking that they're talking about if there's no essence in the, let's see, going back to the, wait, prior, if there is no essence in the conditions, you can't create something else. I don't know, maybe um, there just
Well,
can't
that's
be
the
any
first
other
part.
essence.
That's
Okay,
the first part of that third stanza, I think, is saying the essence of entities is not present in the conditions.
but it seems like that's just being carried into the next part, which is then if there isn't such an essence, then there can't be something else to be created.
Emily,
I don't know.
from
Um,
your sick bed of
yeah,
malakriti.
exactly. Um, Thinking about the color blue, is it like saying, well, if blue doesn't exist, then all those conditions that come together to make that appearance of blue also don't have swabhava. So it's like, the rods and cones in your eye and your perception of blue, and then also the pigment, like I'm looking at my stapler, which is blue, like the pigment on the end of my stapler, like the cells there that reflect light in a certain way that makes it appear blue, like all of those things. And then the photons, all of those also don't have like a swabhava of blue because blue, the perception of blue doesn't have swabhava of blue. Would that be kind of what they're saying here?
Well, that goes back to what Chris said, the fact that the so-called thing that's produced doesn't have essence. Why does that negate the essence of the conditions?
Well, I feel like in that example, it helps me anyway to like I don't know. I think when I'm talking to non-Buddhists, that's the first place they go is they say, okay, fine, like blue, I get that blue is like this perception in my mind here, but like the photons exist and the like paint, on the stapler exists and the rods and cones in my eye, those exist. It's just like when it all comes together, that's the sort of non-existent part, right? And I feel like no, like if the blue doesn't exist on the that first step, then you can't then take it to the next level of the conditions and say, yeah, but it does exist in all of these conditions separately. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. Or I don't think that makes any sense, period. And so it's like you can keep going back down those layers of conditions, and each level, the sort of existence of blue or photon or whatever it is falls apart as you go like deeper and deeper because the original starting place was falsified.
Well, let's cheat. Oh, Rob, and then let's cheat. I'm going to read Garfield's commentary because half his book is his commentary.
So, like, the blue isn't imported from any one of those things. None of those things has the blue in it. The blue is the result of everything. It's a group project.
Right, but they don't. The blue does not exist separately in any of those.
No,
The
it only
perception of
exists
blue.
when all those things come together,
Yeah.
and
I
Okay,
think
only in that moment.
Chris.
if we can expand a little bit from the particular case of blue, um, I think what he's saying is not only is it impossible that blue could have been caused, the consciousness of blue could have been caused, but that nothing could be caused. That causation in and of itself is inconsistent. It's a illogical, incomprehensible notion that doesn't withstand philosophical scrutiny. Now, if causes can't exist, or if effects can't exist, then neither can causes, because a cause that can't produce an effect is nothing at all. So in the case of the father and son, we have an asymmetrical dependence relationship where the son relies on the father doesn't rely on the son existentially. But what he's saying is that there's a symmetrical relationship between causes and effects, where if one can't exist, then neither can the other.
I agree with that. That's what he's getting at. In our case, there's where or at least I had this tendency initially to look at the four conditions as independently existent phenomena and say, well, they're like pre-existing things. But the way it's being used here is that those exist as conditions, and they only exist as conditions if they were causes. As Chris is saying, these four that are called conditions are really causes, and they are not causes if they don't cause anything, unlike what we normally think of as things. So let's see,
Wait,
Garf.
And that was a view that was common within the Abhidharma, that things had their essence by virtue of being able to produce causes.
But there's a tendency to think that things have multiple properties. So, like the object condition is a patch of blue, and I'm like from a simplistic point of view, I'm thinking, well, there's that independently existing patch of blue, and it happens to act as a causal condition for my perception of blue.
Or for stapling pieces of paper together. In the
Blue.
case of Emily's blue stapler.
Ah,
Just talking about intersecting, there's the sort of matrices of causality that coincide in a single object.
and the blue stapler and the color of the stapler are two different things, right?
Yeah.
That's part of. I feel like we didn't really go deeply enough into the significance of the Dharma chart, where colors are separate dharmas, and so they're separate. When we look at objects, we think there's a package that has tangibility, it has odor, it some things have a taste. um, Maybe they make a sound, and they have a color. And we think that those are like five different attributes of a thing. They think there's no like existential thing, but there's just these attributes. And that's a very elusive idea because it's like mind only. And we know that they felt that the external objects were truly existent, but they sort of broke down this idea of objects being like this. What was it last time? The the bare particular. Like there's a bare particular out there that has the property of stapler, the property of blue, the uh, like the sound of rattling if you hit on it or something. I don't know how the stapler might taste or smell,
Maybe Emily can tell us.
but let me read Garfield's explanation. So he says for verse 3, the point being made in the first two lines of the verse is fairly straightforward. When we examine the set of conditions that give rise to an entity, for example, the set of conditions we detailed above for the shining of lamps. So he gives an example scenario in his explanation of verse 2 of turning on a lamp. When we examine the set of conditions that give rise to an entity, for example, those giving detailed above for the shining of a lamp or the conditions of seeing a tree, no analysis of those conditions yields the consequent effect. Dissecting light switches, wires, brains, and so forth does not reveal any hidden light. So as Rob was saying, that color blue doesn't exist in any of the four conditions itself. And sometimes we think, well, the color blue exists in the blue object. But nor is there a tree perception to be found already in the existence of the tree. So that's the key word, is perception. So there's not a consciousness of blue in a blue object. You might say, well, a blue object possesses blueness, but it doesn't have visual consciousness of blueness. And really, blueness only exists as a visual conscious phenomena. Nor is there a tree perception to be found already in the existence of a tree, nor is there a tree perception to be found in the existence of the tree, the eye, and so forth. Rather, those phenomena arise as consequences of the co-location of those conditions. But Nagarjuna, through his use of the phrase the essence of entities, and he gives the Tibetan Nowo Namki Rangzhen, which is Swabhava of the sense perception, in this case, essence of entities. Oh, no. Like Sarvastivadin, basically, emphasizes a very important metaphysical consequence of the observation. Given that phenomena depend on their conditions for their existence, and that nothing answering to an essence of phenomena can be located in the conditions, and given that there is nowhere else that an essence could come from, except maybe from UPS or FedEx, but they didn't have that back then. It follows that phenomena that arise from conditions are essenceless. So, like these four conditions come together, or causes come together, and they produce something that supposedly has a swabhava. And so they make swabhava out of thin air, because all four of those did not have the swabhava of a consciousness of blue. So where did the consciousness of blue come from? The essence of that phenomena appears miraculously out of the magician's hat. Stephen.
And then each of the conditions also don't have their own svabhava because it sort of turtles all the way down, right?
That's right. So that's the next step, is then it's like their existence as conditions falls apart, which is what we get into.
They depend on other conditions.
Right. So that's the
And it
second
and it
part of
it falls apart in both directions. Not only does it fall apart in the fact that they themselves were caused, supposedly, and their own swabhava must can't can't have come from their causes, but also it falls apart in the forward direction of they're unable to cause effects, since effects can't have causes.
Okay, good. So let's continue. The second half of the third stanza of the first chapter is if there's no essence, there can be no otherness essence. So I think he's going back to the tetralemma and saying, well, production from other does not is not viable. And you can't say that there's something other than this phenomena if you can't show this phenomena as a
Does that mean sort of like you can't say something is good unless there is also something that's bad?
exactly,
You can't
yeah,
say something is tall unless you have to, there has to be a short.
that's right.
Okay.
Everything is referential in that way. So then we get into four. Power to act does not have conditions. This sounds like a sort of engaged Buddhism philosophy, I think. Is that what your take on this is, Chris?
So I'll just read the Sideret's translation. An action does not possess conditions. Or we could say a cause does not possess conditions, nor is it devoid of conditions. Conditions are not devoid of an action, neither are they provided with an action.
And so this is getting to that other term that we encountered in Abhidharma world. Remember that one school said, or maybe it was the Vaibhashikas who believed that dharmas exist 2 to 3 times, and they said they all have swabhava, but in the present they have productive capacity, kariya, as well, the power to produce effects. Power. So read Sideret's. Anybody know how to pronounce his name?
Derek and I ran through the tetralemma of pronouncing his last name. Couldn't.
Marx
Decide.
Sideret's.
Okay, so here's his of stanza 4. An action does not possess conditions, nor is it devoid of conditions. Conditions are not devoid of an action, nor are they provided with an action.
Things are looking pretty murky for conditions. not, not looking up. Okay, so these are the logical consequences. The sort of whole system of causality begins to come apart. Um, First
And
from
any sufficiently complex or sophisticated notion of causality is going to take conditions into consideration. So you can't just have the seed; you also need the soil and the water and the sunlight in order for it to sprout. And what he is trying to do is sever any sort of essential link between the cause, the seed, and the conditions: soil, water, sunlight.
okay, so then stanza 5. Let's see. Garfield has those. These give rise to those. So these are called conditions. As long as those do not come from these, why are these not non-conditions? Let's be consistent in our terminology. If conditions are not producing anything, then anything that has essence, or that if there's no result, then they should be non-conditions. They should be called non-conditions. Is he like splitting hairs, or like
My read is that he's saying
Making a
that
painful point.
how can we make sense of the conditions if they're not the cause? If in what way can we meaningfully say that the sprout results from the soil? And we want to say the seed is the cause, but how can we possibly tie the soil to that dependence relation if it
Yeah,
doesn't produce an effect?
yeah. If they don't act as causes, then we shouldn't call them causes.
Yeah, if it's not a cause, how if it doesn't
What are you
produce
talking
effect, how
about?
can it be a cause? It's
Yeah,
basically saying that the notion of condition, while intuitive and useful, doesn't withstand philosophical scrutiny.
okay. We're almost halfway. Six, for neither, Garfield, for neither an existent nor a non existent thing is a condition appropriate. So, if something's existent, then there's no point in having a condition because it's already existent. And if it's not existent, then there's no way a condition can bring about, change it into existent.
Cynthia.
So are they just kind of, in a sense, splitting hairs about the whole notion of time and process here? That between the time when something has had a seeming effect and before it does, that like I'm not sure whether that's what they're talking about here. Um, that at some point in time the condition has not yet caused something, and then at a later point it has, but yet we call it a condition whether it's in its effective state or not, is what it seems like. That's one interpretation of what they're talking about in these. Like, for
I think
example,
that's
the sprout has not yet arisen, but the soil is a condition for it, and the soil is sitting there while the sprout isn't yet a sprout.
yeah,
And
a condition for what? There's no sprout.
right. So, I mean, so essentially they're just kind of balking at the notion of time and process, what we think of as time and process, right?
I think they're taking the Abhidharma system of dividing undivided space, undivided reality into constants that have relationships with each other and act upon each other. Whereas it's like taking the air in the room that you're in and cutting it up and dividing it into little segments and giving them all different names and saying that they have different properties. All the little, like if you cut up the space in your room into like 1 inch cubes and gave them all different names and different attributes.
And doing that with time. So
And exactly, time
cutting
elapsed the
time
same
that's sort
thing.
of undifferentiated, and here's moment one and here's moment two, and in moment one the cause exists and in moment two the effect exists. Well, how can, if the effect doesn't exist at moment one, how can the thing be thought of as a cause? And if the cause doesn't exist at moment two, how can the thing be thought of as an effect?
So just to,
Because they're in a dependence relation where one is depending on the other. If they exist at different times, where one replaces the other, how can that dependency relationship be coherent?
so just to sort of jump to the conclusion, how would you describe reality then?
My bumper sticker version is shit happens, don't try to explain it.
Well,
That's a good explanation. I like that.
maybe another way to phrase the takeaway is that if you see causes and conditions, then you should know that that is a sign of emptiness.
Hmm.
How can you see causes and
I,
conditions?
I mean, if you have the illusion, if it seems to you that you are witnessing causes and conditions, then you should know what you're really witnessing in order to have that appearance is emptiness.
And if you're not seeing cause and conditions,
Then you shouldn't see emptiness.
you should see an eye doctor.
Yeah, so it's
Very,
saying that the what we call causes and conditions is a misunderstanding. It's actually a sign of emptiness. And that, I mean, because, and then if you go, you take the text and you go through it and you understand, then you
but what
understand.
is emptiness? You know, you're saying it's like X is Y or A is B. If you see X, then you know it's Y. What does that mean? What does that do when you say that? Does it does it when you say it's emptiness, does that just give it another name? Does it concretize it, label it? What does that do?
Well, I mean, the mistaken idea behind causes, and I mean, I'm inventing here, right? The mistaken idea between causes and conditions is concluding that there's a cause and a condition that caused something, is that there's a svabhava that has arisen from that, and that's the mistaken. And then Nagarjuna explains how, in fact, that cannot be so. If you seem to see causes and conditions, if you look closely, the very fact that things are appearing that way, if you work it through, is telling you that it's all empty.
So that's different than saying you're seeing emptiness.
Well, I'm using words, but
Okay.
But
I
I'm
think
just
the idea is
curious.
that emptiness is a sort of corrective measure for mistaken appearance. Um,
Emptiness is, it has that function.
well, it doesn't have a it as a conceptual device, it has that function, but there isn't any inherent existence to it
Mary,
that to which a function could be ascribed.
okay, Mary Beth and then Cynthia.
When you asked the question before, I wondered if it was just that it's not this or that.
Yeah, stop like describing things. Shit happens, don't explain it. You know, to call it emptiness um, seems to be like, okay, you didn't follow suggestion one, which was not to explain it. So explain it as emptiness is like
Well,
a
I think that
patch.
the problem is that we've already explained it. We've already had the experience of the blue moment of conscious, the blue stapler, and we think very intuitively that the blue stapler exists, and as we go through this process of philosophically scrutinizing the blue stapler, what we realize is that it doesn't exist. And the name for that realization is emptiness. But that doesn't propose a new sort of existence for that. It's a, as we say, non-implicative negation.
So I think the idea is that he's trying to be helpful for human beings such as myself who are fixated on various conclusions. I am fixated in various ways, and he's trying to relieve my fixation by explaining that the objects of my fixation are not the way I do not exist the way I think they do. And it reminds me of, we just went through Moonbeams of Mahamudra by Tashi Namgyal, and there's a place in, think the sustaining or enhancing section where he talks about how um, how you experience mental manifestation as being either different or the same as mind. And he says the normal inclination is that after it's already been separated and you experience thoughts as separate from mind, you then go, oh, that's not really separate from mind. And the other option is that as it's arising, you let go of the idea of it being separate, as you let go of this idea that something other than mind is emerging. And it seems to me that to then to use emptiness, the idea of emptiness as a corrective measure, is that first version of like you've already made the mistake, and then you're going to correct it. Of like, oh, I'm fixating on emptiness. And but I think when Nagarjuna, like, he doesn't say emptiness here. I don't see any place where he says these are empty. But it's more like he's saying, like, catch it as it's happening, and just relax it and release it.
Or
Sure.
almost like not catch it before it happens, but almost like get rid of the space of possibility in which it could happen. That
Get
like foreclose the option to begin with. Like not only remedy the idea of reification with the notion of emptiness, but get rid of the notion of reification altogether.
un, un, yes, eliminate it from the root. Good.
Right. So like I'm thinking we're maybe treating the conceptual our conceptual understanding of that which is inexplicable a little bit too much prose and not enough poetry.
Thank you. And that's the reason, that's partially at least the reason why he wrote this in prose, is like,
And that's why this is so difficult. That's why
yeah,
this conversation, we it's more dreamy than it is concrete.
yeah. It's meant not to be like further productive of reification, of like concrete structure of this, that,
But I think
empty.
what this question is getting at is really sort of the core question that this series of classes is, and we're kind of still in this setup phase where we're setting up the dialectic, but the core question is going to be, so once you've gotten rid of reification, what's left?
But if you've gotten rid of reification, why would you wonder
Well, that's yeah, and that's sort of the essence of the debate is that I don't know, like, and I think the essence of the debate is like, are we allowed to talk about it?
that? Right.
you know,
No, no.
or like, or do you like do you break the first rule of Fight Club if you talk about it?
What is Fight Club? Let's see. Let's see if we can finish this 14 stanza thing in the next 14 minutes. So, number 6, for neither an existent nor a non-existent thing is a condition appropriate. That's the statement, the way it's translated here. Alternate translation: for non-existent and existent things, conditions are not relevant. If a thing is non-existent, how could it have a condition? If a thing is already existent, what would a condition do? So things are not produced from themselves nor from others. 7, when neither existence nor non-existence nor existent non-existence are established, how could one propose the productive cause? So the result is not viable, so the cause is not viable. If there were one, it would be a pointless. It would have no reason to exist as a cause if it was not productive. If an existent entity, he says mental episode. Let's see, Padmakara's object conditions of existing entities. A mental episode is like something that we think, something comes to mind. An existent entity has no object. Since a mental episode is without an object, how could there be any percept condition? There's no object condition if there's no object. That's sort of a tautology, but alternate translation. Do you have Sideritz? Do you want to read him for 8?
Yes. A dharma being existent is said to indeed be without objective support. Then why again posit an objective support in the case of a dharma without an objective support?
Yeah, so this gets to the whole root of the issue of if you define swabhava as sort of independently existing entity, then why could you then even consider the whole scheme of there being causes and conditions? 9, since things are not arisen, cessation is not acceptable. Therefore, an immediate condition is not reasonable. The immediate condition is the consciousness before of the moment before, and the definition or the way that functions, that immediate condition is it ceases, and its ceasing gives rise to the next moment of consciousness. But it doesn't hold water. If something has ceased, how could it be a condition? If things did not exist without essence, the phrase, when this exists, so this will be, would not be acceptable. Who is Nagarjuna quoting here? For 3 points. When this exists, so this will be. When this is, that also arises. Ring any bells? Is that Mick Jagger?
Is that Buddha, Rice Seedling Sutra, or something like
The
that?
Buddha, yeah, when he's describing pratitya samutpada, he says when there's this, then that also arises, right? So that's pretty dangerous ground. He's starting to chip away at the Buddha there. Ooh, that's contentious. In the several or united conditions, that's a little odd translation. The effect cannot be found. What is it that like in each condition separately or in them as a group, the effect cannot be found. How could something not in the conditions come from the conditions? So things can't come from other. However, if a non-existent effect does arise from these conditions, why does it not arise from anything, anywhere, anytime? 13, if the effect's essence is the conditions, but the conditions don't have their own essence, how could an effect whose essence is the conditions come from something that is essenceless? So just further absurd consequence of the basic fundamental premise that essence makes no sense. Therefore, neither with conditions as their essence, nor with non-conditions as their essence are there any effects. If there are no such effects, how could conditions or non-conditions be evident? So he could have ended the book right there, I think. That pretty much sums it up. Maybe we should take a quick look at the other text, the Ratnavali, the so-called text written for a king. And just briefly,
And just to get back to the
yeah,
mythical history, Nagarjuna was said to have produced this person as a king through magical spells that he himself casts, and then writes him letters advising him.
So is that a case of production through self or other?
I think we call it magic.
Yeah. That's a good subtitle to this book. I think we call it magic.
Otherwise known as magic.
That's my other bumper sticker view.
So let's see, on page 212 of our source book, Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, Buddhist Device for Living in Liberation, is on 211, the title page. And chapter 1 is high status and definite goodness. And what are these? Anyone? Like, these are two different things. High status is you made it in the world, right? You got it made. And definite goodness is Dharma. Is you've connected with the path of Dharma, right? So these are two possible goals that for humans, that he's outlining here. Homage to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, I bow down to the omniscient, freed from all defects, adorned with all good qualities, the sole friend of all beings. O King, I will explain practice solely virtuous. Practices solely virtuous to generate in you the Dharma, the doctrine, for the practices will be established in a vessel of the excellent Dharma doctrine. That's a little bit of a tongue twister of a verse right there. In one who first practices high status, definite goodness arises later. For having attained high status, one comes gradually to definite goodness. That's an interesting assumption that when you have everything in this world, then you come into the Dharma. That does not necessarily take place these days, does it?
Yeah, but it may be a persuasive thing to tell a king.
Yeah, that's true. Skillful means. Or maybe they have a different definition of high status than I'm using. I'm giving it sort of a crass level of understanding. Let's see. High status is considered to be happiness. Definite goodness is liberation. The quintessence of their means is briefly faith and wisdom. Due to having faith, one relies on the practices. Due to having wisdom, one truly knows. Of these two, wisdom is the chief. Faith is its prerequisite. One who does not neglect the practices through desire, hatred, fear, bewilderment is known as one of faith, a superior vessel for definite goodness. Having analyzed well all deeds of body, speech, and mind, those who realize what benefit self and others and always perform these are wise. So he lays out this scheme of what he's going to present, these two paths. Just briefly, like, how do you feel? How do you like? What do you think of this text compared to the Karikas? Rather different, isn't it?
I think what comes off immediately is the enormous difference in tone.
Yeah, huge difference in tone.
The first one is very pith.
Very pith, yeah.
Like,
Paradoxical, yeah.
and this is more like verses.
So is it audience based? Here he's talking to a king. Before he was presumably talking to fellow scholars, practitioners of the Abhidharma school.
Yeah, and he doesn't feel the need to go through the arguments particularly. He lays them out in their,
In a
sort of densest
complicated way.
form. Um, Whereas this, he's taking you by the hand and walking you through it.
Yep. Okay, so he goes through the features of development of high status, which is basically a litany of Vinaya, view of activity, of morality, not killing, stealing, and so forth. And he repeats the basic sort of moralistic karma oriented to Buddhist teachings of like, if you kill people in one life, then you will have a short life the next time, and things like that. Cause and effect, karmic cause and effect.
Derek, I was also wondering if high status was a reference to achieving jhana states, and you're sort of getting up in the God realm, but maybe I'm totally off base.
I don't think so. He he includes jhana practice in his texts. He
Right.
he presents that as part of the definite goodness path.
Okay.
So I don't think he includes that here. Um, so then he goes through that, and then on, let's see, on source book page. But let's see what Emily's saying. So on page 214 of our source book, on the bottom, the last stanza, through these practices, one is freed from becoming anything in the lower realms. And 24, through the concentrations, immeasurables. Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Emily. And formlessnesses, the jhana states. One experiences the bliss of Brahma and so forth. Thus, in brief, are the practices for high status and their fruits. Yeah, so he does. Here he includes it in the high status. Thank you. The doctrines of definite goodness, however, are said by the conquerors to be deep, subtle, and frightening to the childish who are not learned. So that could be an interesting way of like inspiring the king to look into these teachings, or he's no child. He's not going to be frightened. It's like a challenge. I am not, I will not be. I have not, I will not have. That frightens all the childish and extinguishes fear in the wise. So a simple statement of no self, right? Declaration of selflessness. By whom who speaks only to help beings, it was said that all beings have arisen from the conception of I and are enveloped with the conception of mine. I and mine, the innate and acquired sense of self. The I exists, the mine exists. These are wrong as ultimates, for the two are not established by a thorough consciousness of reality just as it is. So these two are not established by a thorough consciousness of reality just as it is, which is a clunky way of what's later called a valid cognition of uh, fact of the way things are. The mental and physical aggregates, skandhas, arise from this conception of I, which is false. In fact, um, I'm not sure if the in fact is like actually in the Sanskrit that he wrote in, or whether the translator is using it as a phrase. But when you study the valid cognition system, inference based on fact is the fundamental first step in true understanding of the nature of reality. And upon that inference that's based in fact, fact is experienced through direct non-conceptual cognition, and then based on that, we make valid inferences.
There's a footnote on, in fact, did
Yeah,
you
what
know
does he
that?
say? Oh, cool. Means ultimately or as existing, able to bear analysis. Cool. They even had bears. Okay. How could what is grown from a false seed be true? So how could an understanding which is based on false perception be true? Having seen thus the aggregates is untrue, the conception of I is abandoned, and due to abandoning the conception of I, the aggregates rise no more. We put an end to the 12 nidanas, and the whole cycle of birth and death falls apart. Just as it is said that an image of one's face is seen depending on a mirror, but does not really exist as a face, so the conception of I exists dependent on the aggregates, but like the image of one's face. the I does not at all really exist. So an explanation of how the projection of a sense of self onto the skandhas takes place, the designation of self and the basis of designation. Just as without depending on a mirror, the image of one's face is not seen, so too the conception of I does not exist without depending on the skandhas. Then he talks about Ananda, when the superior or the Arhat Ananda heard what this means, he attained the eye of doctrine, the eye of the Dharma, and repeatedly spoke of it to the monastics. He couldn't stop talking about it when he finally attained enlightenment. And so he goes on and on about this, and we're over time. But
Can we just do one more little bit?
yeah, find one in. You already
So if we
picked
go
one.
to the bottom of page 217, and this is verse 45, 43, and skipping over some interesting stuff. But in brief, the view of nihilism is that the effects of actions do not exist. Huh? Without merit and leading to a bad state, it is regarded as wrong view. In brief, the view of existence is that effects of actions exist, meritorious and conducive to happy transmigrations. It is regarded as a right view. Because existence and non-existence are extinguished by wisdom, there is a passage beyond meritorious and ill deeds. This, say the excellent, is liberation from bad transmigrations and happy transmigrations. So I thought this was very interesting, insofar as he's talking about recognition of the efficacy of karma, that if you do bad things, you'll end up in bad places, and good things, you'll end up in good places. But then saying that wisdom transcends both of those. So on one hand, you do have a picture of a cautionary tale of, and we saw the whole like first part of the chapter is very strong in that way of as Derek described, wanting to pursue virtuous actions so that you don't murder people, so that you don't have a short life your next lifetime. But then also wisdom, that the true path is wisdom that transcends that. So I think what we see here is a more of a presentation of the two truths as both valid than we see in the Karikas, or at least in the chapter of the Karikas that we looked at.
Yeah, the option of cutting through the whole karmic cycle.
While also
Quite clearly.
recognizing the apparent reality of karma.
Yeah,
and
both
not
options.
dismissing that, not resorting to nihilism.
Yep. Great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Derek.
Let's conclude with the dedication. You want to lead us in that, Chris?
By this merit may all obtain omniscience. Or we do that one? We do that one. By this merit may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good week.
And next
see you
week
soon.
we'll talk about Nagarjuna's successors and how people tried to figure out what the hell they were going to do with this stuff.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, take care,
Thank you.
everyone.
Take care.